What's up, guys? Welcome to the Being Beautifully Honest podcast and channel. Thanks so much for being here, for being subscribed. If you're not, go ahead and hit that button. And if you're listening on YouTube, hit that like button. It's like walking in the room and hitting that light switch. Let's brighten up the place and get into this podversation. This story is pretty sad, but, I wanted to talk about this from another perspective because, as you know, here on this platform, I don't come here to report stories or to report the news. I see topics, if there's things that are of interest to me and there's something behind it that I just want to discuss and share my thoughts and views on, that's what I do. And then I allow you to chime in if you want to do the same in my comment section, because I really appreciate you all being here. But I'm going to be honest with you guys. One, it's sad to hear when anyone, famous or non-famous, doesn't live out to what I believe to be your true potential. Because Matthew Perry, even though he was 54 years old, for some people that may seem old, and I get it. But honestly, the more you live and the greater in years you are allowed to achieve in life, even though life is not easy, life is hard for most people. It really is. 54 is not old. So let's be clear about that. There still are people that are living to be in their 80s, 90s, and even 100s. And listen, if you're living a hard, stressful life, you may not even want to live to be that old. So I get that also. But I wanted to share my thoughts on this because I read the story about his passing and I read it from the Hollywood Reporter. I'm actually going to put a link to that article in the description box if you would care to read it, because I'm quite sure there are stories about him almost everywhere that you can think of now, because not just because of who he was, but because of the show that he was on that lasted for a lot of seasons, was extremely popular all across the world. It honestly was a show that I didn't watch. I didn't watch Friends. I wasn't interested in it. Not speaking anything negative about it, but it just wasn't something that I watched. I definitely did watch the show Living Single, which actually Friends was derived from. And that even was admitted at one point in time, many, many, many years later. But yet and still, Living Single, which starred Queen Latifah, Kim Coles, who I actually had the pleasure of meeting on several occasions, and she's extremely, extremely nice woman. It did not get the acclaim that Friends got, and most of us know why, but I'm not even going to get into all of that. But I want to share something because I really thought about this after just reading this article and thinking about this documentary that my husband and I watched actually earlier this year, probably around summertime. We were out of town traveling and we're staying at a hotel and we were just watching something on Showtime, I believe. And it was a documentary on Whitney Houston. And I know there are lots of documentaries about her, but we both came to this conclusion at the end of that documentary. And I want to talk about this about Matthew Perry because I kind of feel the same way I did about Whitney Houston that I do about Matthew Perry at this point in time. So Matthew Perry, he's now on the other side. 54 years old is his death age, okay? But he's survived by his parents. Now, I don't think that's an easy thing for any parent to outlive their children. But he is out-survived by his mother, his father, and his stepfather. He was raised by his father, John Bennett Perry, and mother, Suzanne Morrison, and stepfather, Keith Morrison. And it says he always had the support of his parents. Now, this actually is from People, this part that I'm reading right now. The Friends actor who died on October 28th at his Los Angeles area home was raised by his father, John Bennett Perry, mother, Suzanne Morrison, and stepfather, Dateline's Keith Morrison. John and Suzanne welcomed Matthew in 1969, though the two split less than a year later. Both John and Suzanne went on to remarry and welcome more children and their respective partners. Suzanne wed Keith in 1981, while John married wife Debbie the same year. And Matthew grew up in Ottawa, Canada, with his mother before moving to California to live with his father as a teenager. Okay? Matthew's parents were by his side throughout his long struggle with addiction too. When Matthew was hospitalized in 2018 after his colon burst due to years of opioid use, they rushed to the hospital to be with their son. Now that's a very, very scary thing. Like, think about that. Your colon bursting, rupturing. They told his parents that he had a 2% chance of living. 2%. And that happened years ago. And even after that situation, he was still having problems with addiction. In 2013, he revealed to people that he didn't become sober until he was 43. 43. He said, you can't have a drug problem for 30 years and then expect to have it solved in 28 days, which honestly is true. He said, I've had a lot of ups and downs in my life and a lot of wonderful accolades, but the best thing about me is that if I'm an alcoholic and an alcoholic comes up to me and says, will you help me stop drinking? I will say, yes, I know how to do that. And that's really, really sad. But he said something about his celebrity during the time of the popularity of Friends. He says, there was steam coming out of my ears. I wanted to be famous so badly. He said in an interview with the New York Times, you want the attention, you want the bucks, and you want the best seat in the restaurant. I didn't think what the repercussions would be. When stardom happens, it's kind of like Disneyland for a while. For me, it lasted about 8 months. This feeling of, I've made it, I'm thrilled, there's no problem in the world. And then you realize that it doesn't accomplish anything. It's certainly not filling any holes in your life. Now, to hear that is really crazy, because if you think about it, guys, he didn't do much work after Friends ended. And he didn't really have to. He didn't really have to do much work after Friends ended because he made so much money from that show. And then I'm quite sure all of the airings of it in syndication, they had really great contracts. So it wasn't like people who were on the Cosby Show, like once that show stopped airing in syndication, people had to go and work at Whole Foods. You know what I mean? So he was good financially, but the struggles of addiction is just like, yeah. So as the pressures of celebrity mounted, he turned to alcohol to ease the tension. In 1997, he had a jet ski accident, and this led to taking painkillers and years of abusing Vicodin. He went into rehab in 2001. He admitted he remembered little about the final 3 seasons of Friends because of his drinking. You know what I'm saying? So even though he did some acting gigs after Friends, and a lot of those things did well, they weren't things like Friends where he was on for a long period of time. But Friends generates so much revenue still to this day. That's why it meant nothing, honestly, for them to get paid $1 million per episode. I mean, let's think about it. That really was nothing for them to get. But they still had to come together, stand on their laurels to say, we're not, any of us, all of the cast, the main cast, shall we say, stand together and say, if you want this show to go on, we're not going to move forward unless you give us what we are demanding. And they got it. But looking back on that now and what is going to happen moving forward for them, for the producers, for the creators, all of the people, the big wigs, it's going to generate so much more revenue because of his passing. Think about it. He's the first one out of the main cast of 6 characters to have passed away. And in my opinion, gone too soon. 54 years old is not old. 54 years of age. So I don't even like saying 54 years old. 54 years of age. But he died Saturday in a hot tub at his LA home, and law enforcement sources told the Los Angeles Times that the authorities responded around 4 p.m. to his home, where he was discovered unresponsive. The LA coroner's office hasn't yet established the cause of death. And while he had achieved massive success as part of Friends, which is one of the most successful shows of all time, he battled substance abuse for decades. In 2022, in his memoir, Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing, he reflected extensively on his struggles with drugs and alcohol and noted while he was promoting the book that he had been clean for 18 months, but had probably spent $9 million or something trying to get sober. $9 million? That is absolutely insane. And in my personal opinion, I don't know much about that life or even the life of trying to get clean. But I believe that there have been people who have not been where he was and was able to get the help and didn't have close to the amount of money that he has had, and they were able to get clean. So to me, it sounds like people were definitely taking advantage. Okay? And what I want to say about this, ultimately, to sum it all up, it's sad that he's gone. And his parents, biological and step, I'm quite sure they are mourning the loss. But what I want to say about this is it's very unfortunate. I'm not saying that they wanted him to die, but for family, when they're dealing with someone who has these constant issues and battles and struggles of addiction, they get more peace, in my personal opinion, once that person passes. So again, I'm not saying that they were wishing that he would die, but I don't believe that they're too upset about it, if you get my drift. And unfortunately, the greed of Hollywood, this is huge bank for them. Huge. They're going to be profiting off of this man so much more now because he's gone. But wrapping it up in a bow of celebration of life or mourning, the death, or gone too soon, or we miss you, what a great talent. The different things that they use for the sake of playing on people's emotions to get them to tune in. But this is bank for them. And so when I heard about his passing, and I read this article, it really made me think about that documentary that I saw that my husband and I were watching regarding Whitney Houston. And I mean, ultimately, the way we summed it up was she was better off dead to them than alive because she just could not get clean and they got tired of it. And so seeing that his parents and step-parents at the ages they are, still alive, still well, healthy to the public's knowledge, I don't believe that they're going through any you know, diseases where they're struck or having to constantly go to the doctors or the hospitals or things like that. They're for the most part healthy and living at the age that they're living. He could have still been alive. But unfortunately, it sounds like there were people that were really around him that were not really there for him, that were taking advantage of him, spending $9 million trying to get sober. I know people don't really believe that God and Jesus can heal, but I do believe that if you really want the help, and it's free, although a lot of people feel like the churches take advantage of people, and yes, some of them do, not all though. If he could have just gotten around the right circle of people, I believe he could have still been alive, could have been clean a long time ago, and it definitely would not have cost him $9 million trying to do it. Okay? So I just wanted to talk about that briefly, guys. You can share your thoughts about it in the comment section below. Thank you guys so much for being here, for liking and subscribing. I'm Beth, just being beautifully honest. So until the next time, I wanted to keep it brief, beautiful, and now I'm going to say bye.